And when you look into the results of the study, the fact that the Oreo biscuit produced a greater response than cocaine on the brain is the thing that's alarming. What's going on YouTube, it's Jason, and in this video we are going to be answering the question, is sugar addiction real? Now this is a controversial topic and it generally has two sides. On one side, you have overweight people who have been telling us for years that they're addicted to sugar and they feel out of control with certain foods. And on the other side of the coin, you have society who, put frankly, don't really care. They only recognize the four big hitters of addiction: gambling, sex, drugs, and alcohol. Anything outside this is a figment of your imagination, it's your fault, and you need to get on with it. Thankfully, we now have some scientific research which sheds a bit more light on this debate. So, there was a study carried out by Connecticut College on rats, and in this study they exposed the rats to two side-by-side chambers. In the first instance, they had a choice between rice cakes and Oreo biscuits, and they chose the Oreo biscuits. And in the second instance, they had a choice between an injection of saline and an injection of cocaine, and the rats gravitated towards the injection of cocaine. The interesting part of this study was that when they examined the pleasure part of the brain, or the activity part of the brain with the rats, they had a similar, if not a greater experience when they consumed the Oreo versus the cocaine. Now, as with every study, it has drawn criticism. Number one, it was done on rats. Rats are not humans, which is obvious, but by the same token, rats and animals have been used for years to test various products and medicines before they're launched or tried on humans. And the things that make rats react typically make humans react as well. So we need to be careful before throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And number two, people are saying that there was no direct comparison. If you think about it, it was Oreo versus rice cakes, it was saline versus cocaine. There wasn't a specific Oreo versus cocaine comparison, but the pleasure part or the reaction to those substances was similar, if not more, with the Oreo biscuits. And that brings us on to dopamine. Dopamine is a natural chemical that gets released in the brain that kind of tells the body that the brain likes what we're doing. For example, when you have sex, or when you sleep, or when you exercise, there is a normal and natural release of dopamine. However, there is something called a dopamine spike or a dopamine hit, and this usually happens when people consume drugs, or they gamble, or they have an exciting stimulus. And when you look into the results of the study, the fact that the Oreo biscuit produced a greater response than cocaine on the brain is the thing that's alarming, because it's commonly accepted that drugs like cocaine produce something like 8 to 10 times the response of dopamine versus some of the natural things that I listed, like sleep and exercise. So if the Oreo biscuit's producing a greater response than that, you can see where we run into trouble. And just to be clear, that dopamine hit or that rush is not the thing in and of itself that causes the addiction. What causes the addiction is the chemical changes in the brain. Essentially, when you get that rush or that surge, the brain begins to make the association with said substance and that feeling, and over time, the more and more you use that substance, the more desensitized you become to dopamine. So what you are left with, sometimes permanently, is the body's desire to achieve said high, but also a built-in tolerance where the same substance and dose doesn't have the same effect. So when I first found out about this study a couple of years ago, I started trying to use some of my clients, particularly my obese clients, as guinea pigs. What I would do is put them on a 10-day sugar fast when they wanted to lose weight, and in nearly all cases you would see withdrawal symptoms. You would see headaches, you would see fatigue, irritability, and stress, and this was all because the sugar was pulled back. And this is quite consistent with the 3 stages of addiction that we now know about. Number 1 is the binge or the hit. Number 2 is the withdrawal symptoms or the negative emotions that people get from said substance being removed. And number 3 is the craving, or when people essentially seek out that substance. And that's exactly what would happen with my obese clients. So if you were to ask me now, based on this study and my personal experience with clients, is sugar addiction a thing? I would say most definitely. Like, we need to give it its respect. If cocaine is seen as a drug and an addictive substance that you can check into rehab, then if sugar or the Oreo biscuit is producing a greater response, we ought to see it as something that could get people addicted and begin to help people out of that. So, if we think we have a problem, what are 3 things we can do to help us out of this addiction? Number 1, just like with any addiction, you have to recognize it as a problem. Are you someone that needs a sugar hit with their lunch? Or are you someone that needs a pick-me-up at 4 p.m. when you get that energy crash? If you're someone that depends on processed sugar every single day, you may have to accept that you have a problem, even if society don't recognize it as a problem. Point number 2 is to fast from sugar. If you think about it, we don't come out of the womb craving sugar. It's a created problem. I hear that breast milk has some sugar in it, but obviously nothing like ice cream, cookies, or dairy milk, for example. This is something that we learn. If I think back to when I first started trying to lose weight, I was eating sugar like 2 or 3 times a day, processed sugar. And I tried to lose weight and I cut out sugar for like a year. And I remember the first 4 to 6 weeks was absolutely brutal. Like, I didn't think I would make it. I was craving sugar every hour of the day. But after that 6-week period, I felt like my body returned to baseline, and I could have gone on for 2 or 3 years. Truth be told, the only reason I reintroduced sugar back into my diet was because I wanted to strike the balance and be able to have more freedom at social occasions. Other than that, I could have kept it up for a very long time. Depending on your level of addiction, I would recommend going without sugar for 10 days, 2 weeks, or even a month if you can do it. By the way, this doesn't exclude all sugar. Things like milk sugars or fruit sugars are absolutely fine. I'm speaking here about processed or added sugar, the stuff that really gives you that dopamine hit. So cut out sugar temporarily so that you become less dependent on it, and then you can slowly reintroduce it further down the line. And point number 3 is to get help. Just like any other addiction out there, you're probably not going to conquer it on your own. I always tell my clients, if you've been trying to do something for 20, 30, or even 40 years, and you haven't done it already on your own, it's almost certain that you're not going to do it on your own this time. It doesn't make you weak when you seek help, it just makes you successful. That's what I always say, accountability makes you successful. Unfortunately, society don't recognize sugar addiction as an actual thing, so you can't check yourself into rehab. But what I would recommend is going to see a nutritionist, nutritional therapist, or dietitian. If you'd like more information on coaching and how you can build a healthier relationship with food, click the link in the description below. So yeah guys, that's everything. Hope you found this video helpful. Just to be clear, this sugar addiction doesn't absolve a person from responsibility. Your weight is still your problem and it's on you to do something about it. But let me know in the comments whether you think it's an addiction or not. I'd love to hear your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to follow me on this journey, and I'll see you again soon.